So let's see if we can get this fast and get ourselves back on track, because I like to run my faculty like a military operation. Because we like getting science done. And this is the name of our new strategic report. As you know, as a new leader comes in, we normally launch a new strategic report. And in contrary to most academics, I have always fundamentally believed that we are here to serve the community. Though we like creating little baby Kristens and the perfect little chemist who will become a professor, the reality is 95% of our graduates, they go on into industry, government, lots of other jobs. And so I believe that my job is to make sure that our programs and our research programs also serve the needs. And the number one need in Alberta is STEM talent and innovation pipeline. And really, the new strategic plan is based on net positive. I'm sure a lot of you understand that concept of net positive. You're in the energy industry. Everything we do will improve the lives of everyone it touches with increased opportunity, discovery, and innovation. We're going to take responsibility for transformative, inclusive, and sustainable growth. And we are going to embrace risk. Collaboration, transdisciplinary to drive change, no one can achieve alone. And I really mean that we are basing everything on community. And we have really, within this new plan, 4 pillars, and I'm only going to talk to you about, largely about activating, let's see if this works. It does, activating science education. And when we came up with this plan, at every step along the way, we reached out to community, and this had really not been done previously at the University of Calgary Faculty of Science. And in particular, we had more than 120 plus consultations, and every day this list grows, with our partners in industry, government, NGOs. We had about 45 sessions in total. This was extensive. And it was a bit shocking, though maybe not unexpected, what I heard. And this quote from a CEO, VP of a super major sums it up. Employers spend time breaking the student's silo identity. So I'm a chemist. But instead, what the employers really want is a problem solver with a chemistry knowledge. So my goal, my marching orders from industry is to flip the narrative. And many themes, three key themes came up when talking to our industry partners. The first theme was wraparound skills, or some people call them professional skills, soft skills, whatever you want to call it. Really, it's nothing new within that list. Things like collaboration, interdisciplinary, teamwork ability, conflict resolution. The reality is science students don't have any background in business. None. They don't even know policy. If you ask a science student, tell me about policy work, they'd be like, I don't know what a policy is. They don't know about regulations. Most of them, though some here today, I've got 4 great students here, wave. You're all over there. Some of them have opted to take entrepreneurial courses, but 98% of our students don't. So these were this growing list of competencies that the industry in Calgary and Edmonton, I'd say beyond, and within Canada, have asked me to start thinking about. The other thing that came out loud and clear was our graduates in general were not workplace ready. So they need to graduate having these basic skill sets, ready that they can walk into a job and not have to be retrained, because that is much more valuable to our industry partners. And so they wanted to see an increased number of internships or co-op placements. And I have to 100% agree with that. The best education a student can ever get is if they go and they work in a company, whether that's for 4 or 8 months. The number one thing Way more important than learning about biochemistry or genetics or physics. It is getting real work experience. And they also ask for increased exposure to the industry. So, one of our key themes in this new Get Science Done theme is activating science education. Oh, the top's been cut off. But we want to become the best place in the country for students who are interested in science to come and launch their careers. UCalgary is presently a commuter school. By 2030, we will no longer be a commuter school. Our aim is to bring the best to Calgary and Alberta, and then we're going to keep them here to transform this economy. By 2030, all graduate students will have mandatory courses within their program on science leadership, career-ready skills, and we'll also have every student will graduated with at least one course in Indigenous science. And our REACH goal is a minimum of 50% of our science graduates will have participated in a 4-credit internship or co-op experience. And I'd actually say that that is probably lower than what we'll end up by 2030. Ideally, we want 80 to 100%. The next theme that came out loud and clear from our industry partners was energy and ag. We're a province whose success is on energy and ag. Yet, University of Calgary really hasn't played a lot of role within that, especially the Faculty of Science. So they wanted us to start thinking about how can we change our programs to meet the pipeline needs, the talent needs of this industry. And with this new department, Earth at UCalgary, we have a revamped geoscience program. I'm proud that so far already we are up twofold in our applications, so we're on a journey to get back to the greatness of geoscience because it's important. We are in the midst of revamping our environmental science program. And, we have right now have developed a new energy science BSc. This will be the first in Canada, and it is really, really unique. It is transdisciplinary. The students will get a real strong foundation in energy science. It's a lot of physics and chemistry, even biofuels. But they're going to learn a lot more. They are going to come out of this program with a strong basis in business, policy, legal, economics. They have to take a minimum of 2 economic courses, and they will have to take an Indigenous land-based course that we're developing. And so one of the reasons I have to end this by 4:10 is I have a call with the Minister of Higher Education to discuss this program. We think this will launch in 2025. And I want to point out we had over 100 different people from industry work with us on developing this program because the program is to meet Alberta's and Canada's energy needs for the future, for this transition. The other thing that's big on our plate right now is Destination Science District. Though we are a young university, sadly, all the science buildings are older than I am. The youngest one is 1972. So to do this type of research, to do transdisciplinary research, and a lot of this takes a lot of heavy HVAC and electricity and CL2 levels, so high biocontainment, we really need to up our game. And so we have received $5 million first stage planning for a new building. We just submitted our full application to the government for would potentially be, it will be a $450 million new science building at the University of Calgary. It is unique in the sense that on the first floor, we're going to have where the students with big lecture theaters, student success center. Outside, there'll be both an Indigenous classroom, but also a geological classroom for students to train. Up above, we'll have a research tower. Unlike any research facility in Canada, we will no longer have people clustered together by departments. You're going to be clustered together regardless of what department, regardless of what faculty you're in, to answer questions. And it'll be a really different form of research. You will no longer get your 800 square foot, and you'll get that lab until you die, whether you have 1 person in your lab or 50 people in your lab. This will be completely different, and it's going to be based on answering problems. And we'll have baby incubators on each floor. And so a floor you would probably be interested in, we will have an energy science floor. One side will be a lot to do with batteries, and the other side, novel extraction industries. So if you're interested in this, please come and talk to me, because we will be launching a capital campaign on this, because the $450 million will only go so far. And with that, I hope you've got a chance to learn a little bit about us. So join me and get science done.
Are we working? Yep. Awesome. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Czapewski. I'm VP of Program Development, Electricity Human Resources Canada, or just EHRC for short, so thank you for that. Thank you for the great nature walk, too, by the way. That was fun. It is my pleasure to begin by introducing the panel on the workforce revolution. I think we've all been hearing a lot in the news the last, well, it feels like 3 years almost, about workforce. So it's an honor to be up here with my distinguished panelists to have that discussion with you today. So we're each going to take a few minutes to just introduce ourselves and also talk about our own organizations and what we do and some key points about workforce. And then we're going to get into some questions. So I'll start off because I pulled the moderator card. So Electricity Human Resources Canada, EHRC, we do labor market intelligence for Canada's electricity industry. What that means is we figure out who's doing what with what skills, and do we have enough of those people, and if we don't, what do we do about it? Then we translate that information into actionable programs. So do we have enough youth in our industry right now? No. So we've designed some programs to respond to that need, working with industry to create more demand for youth positions in the industry through wage subsidies and incentive programs. When we talk about workforce, we just released a new study a couple of weeks ago, actually, called Electricity in Demand, Labor Market Insights to 2023. Or 2028, sorry, we're in 2023. And what that tells us is, in this bigger labor market context, we've got 700,000 jobs going unfilled month over month in Canada. That's down from 1 million, by the way, about just a few months ago. We've got 1.7 workers for each of those jobs that are unemployed. However, they don't have the skills that we need in the open positions. So there's a skills mismatch that's happening. That's sort of the macroeconomic context. We've got over 400,000 immigrants coming into the country each year, needed because we only have 1 worker for every, 2 workers for every 1 person retired. And that's down from 1 in 7 50 years ago. So how are we going to support all of the people that are no longer employed? That's the bigger labor market context. Specific to our industry, there is 1 young person for every 3 people that are over the age of 55. I know that sounds like, oh, it's no big deal, but that is a big deal, and we're not attracting enough people. So when we talk about university programs that are attracting more people into our sector, we need a lot more of that in the very near future. When we look at diversity in our industry, not doing a great job there either. We've increased the total percentage of women in our sector by 1% in 5 years. Previous 5 years was 1%. At that rate, we're going 120 years before we're at gender parity. So we've got a little bit of work to do for ourselves. The other thing is, most women are in corporate services positions. They're not in what we call the core technical roles. They're not in engineering. They're not in skilled trades in particular. There's only 5% of all skilled tradespeople are women in Canada in some specific trades. We've only got a single woman in a single province. So that's an area of work for us as well. When we talk about the skilled trades, actually, I should call them out specifically, not because they've done anything wrong per se, but because we have a problem. We're going in the wrong direction. We have a whole host of things we need to build by 2028, by 2035, by 2050. And our trend line looks like this. We're going in the wrong direction. So we have less tradespeople registering. That is the oldest demographic of our workforce, so more of them retiring. And we have a lot of work to do to turn that trend line around, fundamentally because as parents, as teachers, as guidance counselors, we're telling kids, no offense, University of Calgary, but to go to university first, college second, and if you can't do that, then go to the skilled trades. The truth is, all education and training is important and required for the Canadian economy, and unfortunately, that narrative is hurting us as a country. And so that's not just an us problem as an industry, that's like a Canada Inc. problem, so we're not going to solve all of that today, but it's certainly something that we need to work on. I have lots more that I can say about the labor market, but I think I'm going to hand it on to my panelists because I just saw that the clock started ticking and I'm now 45 seconds past what I was supposed to do. Over to you, Tamara.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara Connell. I identify first and foremost as an educator and facilitator, and for the past year and a half, I've had the pleasure of also being the CEO of the Academy for Sustainable Innovation. And we're relatively small, relatively young, about 5 years old. We are pan-Canadian. I'm based in British Columbia. But our work at ASI is essentially to try to build up the number and the capacity of what we call transition leaders, people who we believe will help organizations make the necessary changes so that we can reach a future that is low carbon and socially inclusive. So that's all of the work. We do all of our work to be in that zone, so to speak. So you can call it sustainability or you can call it climate action. For me, the hope is that we can have every person show up to their job and be able to make decisions on whatever it is that's within their purview, to make those decisions with a sustainability or climate lens. So when we talk about leadership at ASI, we aren't meaning to talk about C-suite or only, sort of director or VP level. We're trying to talk to everyone. We're trying to say you are a leader because you have influence, no matter where you are in an organization. And so ASI was constructed with this mandate. These days, we have a variety of different programs that we offer. We have a couple different courses that we have. We have like custom engagements that are often facilitation-based or stakeholder engagement-based. We've just launched a members network for folks who identify as sustainability leaders in their organization. So maybe you're one of the sustainability team members and you'd like to get together with other sustainability managers and directors, et cetera, from other parts of the country, just to talk about your leadership. What does it mean to be a leader in these times? There's just an immense amount of pressure on these people who are trying to do this work within organizations. And then lastly, we do research as well. So we just wrapped up an interesting research project on the role of micro-credentials within a rapid pan-Canadian approach to Canada's climate transition. So should we use micro-credentials within an approach to rapidly upskilling the workforce regarding climate action leadership? So yeah, I'll just keep it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Tamara. Over to you, Louisa.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. My name is Louisa De Silva. I'm the Executive Director at Iron and Earth. I am very much looking forward to meeting everybody in this room later at that speed networking event, which I think is going to be pretty awesome. My organization is called Iron and Earth. We are a nonprofit with roots in the fossil fuel industry. We were founded by people that worked in the fossil fuel industry who recognized that their skills are both useful for building out the net zero economy and also were concerned about climate change. So we work with fossil fuel workers, with Indigenous people, and with their communities, so people that may not necessarily identify as fossil fuel, but might be the family or the Tim Hortons worker that works within that community that, of course, is affected by this, to create opportunities within the net zero economy. We're very supportive of micro-credential programs and the trainings that are necessary to get to net zero, but we also acknowledge that sometimes there can be a lack of opportunities for people to be able to get that real-world experience, much like what you were saying, Kristen, and especially even harder so once you're an adult and you've been working in an industry for a long period of time. We do offer training and upskilling programs. We have been very lucky and fortunate to have Indigenous communities put a lot of trust in us and come to their community and build out an infrastructure project, a small one, to very much show them that they can be taking on these skills themselves, and they can also see themselves as part of the net zero economy. We hear a lot of things on the ground from people within these communities that echo very much the kind of research that Mark does, what Tamara sees in her work, and very much what you see. My background is in the, I'm a professional in the field that I won't mention so that the fire alarm won't get triggered. So I have seen very much that kind of industry, the extractive industry, but also how there can be sustainability in there. And also the recognition that to get to net zero, we do need the extractive industry as well. So how can we do that with balance?
Awesome. Now, Kristen, you got a whole 15 minutes earlier. Are you okay if we
I
move
am
on?
okay to move on.
Okay, I just wanted to check in first.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no.
Appreciate that.
People want to talk to me, they can talk to me after.
All right, awesome. So thank you so much, each of you, for sort of outlining your organizations and how it sort of fits into this discussion. The first big question, so our projections are telling us that by 2028 we have to hire 22,000 people, basically, for our sector. And that's both replacement of retiring workers, but it's also growth within the sector. And I should add, to put that in context, right now just the electricity system is 110,000 people, basically, to keep the workforce going, or to keep the electricity on. So that's about 20% replacement and growth. So with that in mind, and recognizing the current challenges that we're facing, retirements, growth, I'd call the skilled trades piece, it almost makes it, instead of a double dilemma, a trilemma, if you will. What are we going to do about it? How do we bring more people into the sector? Because I've been accused of being a Debbie Downer and Mr. Negative, and so to focus on the solutions. So let's start with some solutions. What do we do to draw more people in? I don't know who wants to go first. Louisa, I'm going to call on you.
Okay. From what we see, we have a few avenues. We can bring in foreign workers to be making up the shortfall of the workers that we see. We can be upskilling workers that we already have inside of the country that, particularly as jobs in the oil and gas sector are declining, and that is the trend that we are seeing, and that's not because renewables are taking away jobs from oil and gas. It's very much so because there's just efficiencies that are happening, and this is what naturally happens with industries as they age. They get more efficient, they just require fewer people. Whereas on the flip side, of course, the renewables are like in startup mode on super hyperdrive, and so require a lot of people. And also reaching out to the persons that would have otherwise been left out of this conversation. So we're talking about people that come from those traditional marginalized and vulnerable sectors that maybe face systemic barriers that they just don't even see themselves as a part of this conversation. So with the first, I'll leave it to Mark to talk about the very unique challenges about bringing in foreign workers and how some of those devil in the details, like the labor market impact assessment other category, I love that one. So yeah.
I'll definitely mention that after, for sure.
Yeah, that one's a great one. And how that can be limiting to bringing in the foreign workers. Fossil fuel workers, we did a poll, an Abacus poll back in 2021, and we polled fossil fuel workers right across Canada and asked them questions about, what are their concerns, what are their fears, what do they want to have. Overwhelmingly, we saw that they are concerned about climate change. They do want to have a career in the net zero economy. They don't know how their skills translate, and they don't know what jobs are available to them. So we've created some platforms at my organization that address the latter half of that so that they understand how their skills translate and they also understand what jobs are available to them. But very much there's still some narratives in there that we need to overcome. I think it was said earlier today something about psychology, or maybe you were, I can't remember who was saying it, but that there's very strong narratives, particularly in oil and gas strong provinces, that pins oil and gas against renewables. And we just kind of need to break away from that, because we can have a very healthy place where that is not the narrative that exists, and then people don't feel shame if they start entering the net zero economy or the renewables economy. So I think we need to make renewables cool. We need to kind of make it so that when children are drawing an image of a typical Albertan, they're drawing something that maybe looks more like wind turbines and solar panels, considering especially that Alberta is, well, up until 2 months ago, the leader on that side.
I promised not to say moratorium, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so these are kind of the things that we see on the ground in the work that we do.
Awesome, thank you. And Kristen, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've seen enrollment growth specifically in some of your programs at UCalgary.
Alberta has a serious image problem. And I got to be really blunt. I think that's a lot of our issues with the province. And yet, what non-Albertans think of Alberta is so untrue. And this is probably, I think this is the probably most progressive province in many ways. It is aggressive when it comes to science and technology. It hustles. There is opportunity I have seen here unlike any other province, and I've lived, you name it, except for the far north, across Canada. So there's amazing opportunities here. But I'm telling this story because I think that sort of encapsulates a lot of the issues that we're seeing. We need to start talking about energy. We are an energy powerhouse, energy province. And that changes the story. I don't care, unless you want to go live in a hut with a candle and freeze your butt off in the winter, like, we need energy, right? We talked about this day, the electrification of everything, and that's true. So we want to change that narrative. This is about energy. This is not about oil and gas. And can't believe I'm defending oil and gas companies, but like a lot of them are leaders in this area. They have led the charge on things like carbon capture. And these are stories that we need to quickly break. I think one of the big issues too is the education system, including the universities, but it starts way before that. If you look at Alberta's education curriculums, like, they don't teach kids about geology. They don't teach about energy in depth. And yet, when you think about a province whose future success is so dependent on this, it's a bit mind-blowing. So we have to get that pipeline of students from a very young age getting interested in the sector. And I really want to thank, sorry, I'm so bad. What's your name?
My name's Mark.
I can't see I can look down there. Mark. But there's also this other big issue in the industry and in STEM. It's 2023 and we do not have 50% of our students being female in every single one of our departments. They're knocking down the door in biology. They're sort of okay, they're 50-50 in chemistry. But my other 4 departments, it is still incredibly low, 25, 30, 40% females. And that's just like an easy target. So if we start digging down into all the equity deserving groups, you know, it's grim. So Canada's Chief Science Officer, Mona Niemer, she has a really good expression, like, if we want to succeed in the innovation sector, we need all brains on deck. And I truly believe that when it comes to the energy sector, like, we can't leave people out in the cold. We need to find ways to attract them, to get educated. And the flip side is, I think the industry also has to keep a much more open mind about who they should be hiring. It's complex.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. We've actually done some work on perception of the energy industry, specifically electricity, among Gen Z and millennials. And the unfortunate truth is that about 80% of them don't even think about the sector as a career, or at all, generally. And part of that is what's happening in the lower levels of education, because to your point, Kristen, in most provinces in Canada, you can graduate high school without a grade 12 math and science credits in your diploma. If you do that, you've just opted out of about 70% of all the occupations in this particular industry. Because you can't go on to college without those math and science credits. You can't go on to university, and even in the skilled trades, with one exception, Ontario, they're testing out a new system right now on the apprenticeship side for grade 11. But for most cases, you cannot proceed in any of those roles that are tied to those without a grade 12 math and science. So yeah, no, it's absolutely critical that we engage there, because that truly is representative of the Canadian population, which would hopefully help to improve our representation numbers across the board. I'm going to move on. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask if I
Tamara.
could add to that. Yeah, because I just wanted to encourage us all to be thinking about this with more of a systems lens as well, because it's not just about a marketing effort to get people into the classroom. I have numerous female identified friends who have gone into trades and they last a year or two and then they leave because it is not a welcoming workforce. And so it is about, the promotion. It should also be about who is leading training. Are you seeing yourself represented? And whether that's from a gender diversity or a racial diversity or other elements of diversity within the instructors, within the curriculum, within the case studies, the examples, but it's also at the other end, it's the employers, and what are the training opportunities for employers to ensure that if you do manage to attract, the one female tradesperson, can you keep that person? Can you make it a healthy and productive and like I just said, generative place for that person to stay? And so I think it's one thing to think about the opportunities to come into training, but also how do we retain those people in the workforce?
Yeah, the retention piece has been a particularly tough nut to crack for the industry, for sure. The bro culture is unfortunately still very much alive and well. I'm going to sort of pivot a little bit, because we've talked a little bit about science skills and technical skills, and given the announcement from UCalgary with sort of the multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary nature of the courses of study, there's been a lot of talk about, and I'm going to sort of ring off some names here: soft skills, global competencies, professional skills, skills for success, etc., leadership skills. What are they? And secondly, how do we ensure that more of our labor market entrants, particularly youth, have them? Because if there's one thing, and this was encapsulated for me by a senior leader in Atlantic Canada, whose name I won't release, but she said, "I've never fired anybody for being technically incompetent. I've only ever fired them from being a jerk." Now, she used the A word instead of jerk, but I'm trying to censor myself a little bit. Does anybody want to take that one? No. Not the jerk part, the global competency.
but
See, I distracted them all.
You can train out a little bit of the a-hole in people. And I think that's part of the training skills that we need to be giving people. So I think it's quite remarkable when you look at our class in University of Calgary. There are students who come from, I would say, upper middle class, wealthy, like probably all of you, your kids. They're going to sort of go into universities with a skill set that a lot of the other half of the group doesn't have. For example, my kids already know how to network. My kids already know how to write cover letters. When they go out for a job interview, like damn right at that dinner table, we're going to grill them to death. Like, they're getting those skills through a different means. We have a huge percentage of, at least at University of Calgary, first-generation university students who don't necessarily have that same group of like mentors or parents or families pushing them on, and not even things like how do you have a polite conversation, how do you network. But these are immensely trainable skills. And if we train people and we teach them, we're actually giving more opportunities for all of our graduates, so they're on an equal playing field when they hit that job market.
At my organization, we have a program called the Net Zero Pathways Program. And the intent of this program is to be a 7-week adult internship so that people can be getting these opportunities in the net zero economy. The first week of that program is much simpler for us to deliver than the latter 6 weeks. The 6 weeks are with the employer, but 1 week is with us, and we give people those soft skills. How do you network? How do you talk to people? How do you do a cover letter? Financial literacy, like that's one that's lacking quite a bit. And what we notice is that these are people that are coming into our classroom that do come from those marginalized and vulnerable backgrounds that just wouldn't have had access to this. And frankly, you know, it's probably pretty good to be refreshing on these things anyway, since most of it changes every 5 years or so. The stat that I kind of want to throw out, which is, we're not deaf to this stat at my organization, is we've had about 300 people go through that 1-week program, and only, like, I could count on my hands how many people have gone through the 6 weeks. The bar to get the skills that the employer needs is so distal to where people are starting right now that we do need those kind of micro-credential programs just to kind of get this into them, get it in quickly so that they've got those baseline skills. I'm sure Mark will attest to this, but what we see in our research is that it's not the red seals that employers are desperate for, it's people that are at the technician level, right? A lot of us here are employers, or you are looking for skilled workers. Please put up your hand if you've had no problems finding people for your firm.
And the room has no hands. Oh, one. We have one.
You probably have that one skilled woman tradesperson. So this is definitely a problem that is prolific, and we see that even just those skills that we take for granted, those things that are called soft skills, that is what's preventing people from moving on to that next stage. The technical skills, you can have programs like, for example, Mohawk College has received funding from ESDC. I think it was $46 million that they got, and they've created thousands of micro-credentials which they're offering free to participants. And it's through those kinds of micro-credentials that you can pick up to shorten that gap between where you are now in your skill set and where you need to be for you to be useful to that employer. But without those initial soft skills, you're not going to get very far.
Now, Tamara, I know you want to answer this one.
We have 32 minutes left. I'm trying to squeeze it in. No, I could talk about this forever.
You're not allowed to use all 32 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, stop me in 2. I mean, in my career prior to ASI, I was at a couple of different universities, and this was always a sticking point to me. So I feel really passionate about it. But I think there are ways that we can do university better, and I think it takes a certain level of bravery from administration and professors and others within universities just to be able to lead into that. And for me, it's been a lot of experimentation with project-based learning. So you get the students to pick their projects, or you work with some representatives from the local municipal government or the local businesses around you to come in and have students work on actual projects and to work only in teams. Almost any course I teach, like you have to, in theory, you have to have students have a portion where they answer the questions themselves. But all of the work that we do is all in teams, and it really forces a different set of skills. You have to navigate change. You have to navigate different ways of working, and you have to work, figure it out in teams. You have to go through conflict and figure out, okay, how do we get through that? And I think if you can work with the pedagogy a tiny bit just to encourage reflection within that, their own reflection. So you tried that as a group. Okay, how did you show up in that moment? And what did you specifically learn in that moment? Because you're forcing them to have that reflection on their own action, their own interventions within their group processes. And so I think we just really need to rethink a lot of university. And I was previously at Simon Fraser University. We did had this wonderful collaboration between the business school and Faculty of Science, Health Sciences. And it ran for about 10 years. Glowing reviews, was on all the brochures, and then they shut it down. They shut down the program because they just couldn't figure it out administratively. It was like the most annoying thing. It's like the students were raving about it. They were going directly into jobs. They were working with professionals. They were having meetings with people working at this local city government, and just they were doing fantastic work. And the university just couldn't figure out how to make that work within the bureaucracy. So. I'll stop ranting.
Rant accepted. I'm going to pivot a little bit. It ties into the micro-credential discussion. Put your hand up if anybody who knows what a micro-credential is. Oh, good. About 50%. Okay. Who could define it in less than a sentence? Nobody. All right. So we're going to talk about micro-credentials a little bit for that particular reason. And one of the reasons we're going to talk about it is because technology is advancing so quickly. We've heard a lot of the discussion this morning. I mean, I was introduced to a new concept, virtual power plants. That was sort of new for me. And that also, again, I'm going to tie our labor into it because that's what I do. When we did our labor market forecasting, the skilled trades were absolutely like trending the wrong direction. The other challenge we face as an industry is information communication technology. We are trying to attract people to roles that share skill sets with Google, Shopify, Amazon, RBC, all the big players in technology. And they're all willing to pay premium prices for individuals in those roles. When we project forward to 2028, this is one of the biggest areas of deficit that we're looking at as an industry, is attracting those ICT professionals into our roles as energy roles. And one of the reasons for that is we don't have a lot of well-defined programs in Canada that layer digital technology onto analog technology, because that is a very defined set of skills. And so that's something that we have to figure out. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the potential solutions for that could be micro-credentials. And the reason we're talking about micro-credentials specifically is when we think about somebody who has a university degree, as employers, we all recognize that an engineering degree, regardless of where it came from, is usually pretty typical from one university to the next. College diploma, same thing. Skilled trade Red Seal, same thing. How do we recognize the skills that are learned on the job when you're bouncing from one employer to the next employer to the next employer? I have lots of stories of companies that have, and actually trainers who do work for those companies, where somebody has worked as, say, a wind turbine technician at one firm, goes to work for another firm, takes the exact same training program with the exact same trainer that they've previously taken at the firm that they were at before. That is an incredibly inefficient way to run a labor market or to run an industry. And so let's talk about micro-credentials. What are they? How do we use them? And maybe somebody fill me in. Anybody want to take the lead on this one? Louisa.
Another one of the initiatives that my organization does, we don't call it a micro-credential, we call it upskilling, but it's 10 days long. People spend 5 days in the classroom learning more of the book knowledge. You know, this is what electricity is, this is what renewable energy is. It's specific to if we're doing a solar installation or if we're doing a wind installation. These are all microsystems as well, so nothing above 9 kilowatts. And then they spend the next 5 days actually doing the installation themselves, so they get the hands-on knowledge. What we see is that particularly in the communities that we have worked with, people come up to us and say, I'm 40 years old, this blew my mind, I had no idea that I could be part of this industry, and now because I have done this and taken it on, not only do I want to get involved in this, but I want to tell my children and I want to tell my family to do it. The other thing that we see as well, slightly off topic of micro-credentials, is that because that infrastructure is left in the community, this now also speaks to the youth of the community because now it's a part of the fabric of their community and they can see themselves as part of that. So the micro-credentials, or however you want to frame those programs, they are just meant to be really short, meant to get the information in your hands, almost enough to entice you to come in, give you enough knowledge that you will be on a work site in a safe way, so you get the fall arrest training and all these other things beforehand, and you are prepared enough to arrive at an employer and be able to start working with them. There's of course micro-credentials that are less tactile and less hands-on and more on the ICT side of things, but all of them kind of come to the same sort of notion. Some of them are a bit longer, some of them might span 6 weeks. But the thing that's kind of critical to micro-credentials is although they're not as long as, you know, more formalized university programs like a bachelor's degree and whatnot, they still take time out of your employment. And so it needs to be something that is short enough that the person won't be without income, but long enough that they can pick up those skills. And again, to bring in the lens of intersectionality across marginalized communities, People should not have to be out of pocket just to be able to pick up skills. So what we notice with our programs is by providing subsidies, wage subsidies, where they earn an hourly wage as they're at the micro-credential and doing these installations themselves, that really has increased the participation in the micro-credential.
Yeah, those are great examples, Louisa. Anybody? Tamara?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges with micro-credentials is that there isn't a common definition in Canada. There are some examples of frameworks that try to align micro-credentials within other sort of levels of education in other countries. So in New Zealand and Australia and parts of the EU, I believe, as well. And we've just wrapped up our study on micro-credentials in Canada. They are coming out fast and furious. There's hundreds of them within our sort of purview of climate action, climate leadership that we looked at. But they range from 1 hour to like 120 hours. So you're really like, how do you compare that? As an employer, someone says, oh, I have a micro-credential in X, Y, and Z, but if you don't know exactly what that means, it's hard for you to utilize that within your hiring process and then your subsequent training process. So one of the recommendations coming out of our research was that we do need a framework of some sort to work with so that employers have more certainty, learners have more certainty, lots of best practices. Louisa was kind enough to be part of one of our interviewees in our research, and some really great practices coming out of Iron and Earth. Upskill Canada also does a lot of great work around upskilling, and they have a real focus on employer-backed. Yeah. It's only considered a micro-credential if there's a job at the end of it, and so it's designed with employers. But yeah, we're definitely hearing, people want short, ideally online. So virtual learning is short, modular, stackable, and as cheap as possible, ideally funded so that they don't have the lost wages. So those are the kind of the things that we were hearing about.
Do you want to step in on this one, Kristen?
Yeah, so I have all the exact same things that Tamara was talking about. I still think micro-credentials is a bit of the Wild West in the educational system. I do worry that some people are being bamboozled out of money. They're taking micro-credentials, believing that they're going to now have a job. There's not a lot of regulation or control over micro-credentials. So I think this is the future, to really be thinking about how is Canada, how is the provinces going to regulate what a micro-credential is. That said, I also fully believe that when we, University of Calgary, especially science, are building micro-credentials, we're doing that hand in hand with an industry. So for example, quantum, Alberta has a very strong vision of Quantum Alberta, and this is Quantum City Initiative. We are working with Emphasis, who's been brought to Calgary, a new headquarters here, to build a stackable master's degree, which is basically built on a certificate, a diploma, and then a master's. So there's like 3 sort of steps along the way, and each one you exit, you're going to be employable at Emphasis or all the new little startups that are happening there. So I think that is really the best way to have it, that you actually have an exit point. You're working hand in hand with industry to make sure that whatever's in that micro-credential is actually useful to the industry itself. And one thing that we have seen on our journeys of micro-credentials, which is really, in our world, stackable towards a master's degree. It's been quite shocking. I would have thought people would just come in and do a certificate. 95% of them are going on for the master's. So I'm not sure if it's really working as intended, but that might just be because we're looking at things like data science, quantum, information security, and normally those employers, they actually want master's degrees. So I think we just have to be careful on what a micro-credential is. I don't want to oversell to anybody because it's somebody's hard-earned money. It's loss of income at that point. So I think as an industry, we just have to be very careful what we do.
I think those are some great points that all three of you have made, and it sort of reemphasizes some of the work that we did at EHRC actually with the University of Waterloo in partnership, where one of the things we were looking at was, what's the value of a micro-credential, and the value really is more important, or there's more value attributed to it if it's issued by a post-secondary institution, first of all, not by an employer or an industry association. So that was like one thing that was a key takeaway for us. However, having an association or an employer or something behind it added that much more value to the micro-credential at the end of the day. And then the last piece of the research that was part of that study was, do we focus on competency or do we focus on hours in class, basically? And from the employer perspective, it was focused on competency every single time. We need to ensure that if somebody has this credential, this micro-credential at the end of the day, are they competent in what we're credentialing? And so that was a very interesting finding to us, and I think it aligns with some of what we're talking about here. How am I doing? You're doing great. Questions? Should we go to audience questions? Definitely. All right. Anybody in the audience? Questions? Labor market questions? Yes, over here.
Thanks for that. You hit on something that's close to my heart. I really want to talk about diversity, particularly in terms of racial diversity, which of course affects me very specifically. Now, I am actually in the process right now of developing, as a consultant, anti-racism workshops like this that I want to give in industry as well as the university. And I've started to kind of have those discussions. And I have to say that although it's encouraging in some ways, there is this little wall that comes up, because it's not easy when you come from a marginalized community to start talking about racial issues, because you can get that sort of denial, are you sure? And it takes a lot out of us to be able to get to that point. And so I look at myself, and I've been in the university for a long time, and people talk to me about diversity, but yet still, they're not saying, David, come on the panel and talk to us about it. So I'm listening to people who don't represent my community talking about, oh, you can look at this particular indicator, this particular factor, or this particular thing. But we aren't there speaking. We are being brought in maybe as, okay, we have one or two people here, but leading and being able to say, okay, maybe instead of saying, well, let's teach people how to write a cover letter or something, maybe we need to do away with that cover letter. Maybe the thing to do is to look at where we are and what are the skills that we have. How are you actually, is your decision-making process actually taking those skills into account? And I think a lot of times it's not happening. And if people within our communities are not allowed to speak at this in a way that we feel safe, because again, it's one thing to be allowed to speak, but if you say something that kind of, oh my gosh, she's saying that we're all racist or something, then suddenly you become the troublemaker, and you need to feel that, okay, you can speak, and you can speak candidly, and it will be taken into account, and it won't be kind of like clap, 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 but that's just the end. So, but I just feel that this really, I think, needs to be stressed on a lot, because yes, there are strides being made, but there's a lot more that is needed. And I just feel that, as I said, I can only speak for myself. I don't feel quite yet that, okay, the university is behind me, Alberta is behind me, I can go and I can speak about the tough situations that I've had at the university and positions I've had. Can I go and say that and still be respected in the field? Because if you don't want to speak against the people that have the power. And when you're talking about in Alberta, let's face it, the industry has the power. So even when we are speaking out, you're not really getting the full thing, because we have to say, well, I can't speak out too much, because then I might lose what I have got in the system. Because most of us that are here are black, we have gone up in that system. So how much can we really push against that system and expect to still have that opportunity and respect? Because we're not looking at us, we're talking about the others who are not in this room, who don't get there. And so we start getting, okay, the few good ones, or the few ones that are fortunate, because we are fortunate to be here, but we really want so much of a wider representation, and I just don't feel yet that we are quite fully committed to this as something that everybody needs to be into as a fundamental piece of it.
First of all, thank you very much for bringing that perspective to the discussion. And before I comment, I'd like to offer the opportunity to somebody else in the panel first.
Can I take that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. At my organization, I want to use that as an example. What we have seen is that when I started at the organization, this was in May of 2021, we were not in a place to bring in racialized people because they wouldn't have felt safe at the organization, full stop. We had to go through a long and lengthy multi-year process of anti-racism and a lot of positionality work. And I really want to implore on everybody in this room, look up positionality and please just start doing the heavy work of positionality, because otherwise what happens if you don't do the work of positionality, then that leaves it to the marginalized person to be advocating for themselves all the time, and it's a horrible place to be starting from. May I use my example, Mark, of the other day, of that question that was asked that was
Go for it.
horrifically, thank you.
I think it's a perfect example. Of
I was
this.
at a conference the other day, and there was one Indigenous woman on a panel, and the white woman asked her, "And what do you think putting an Indigenous person in this project will bring benefit?" And visibly the person stiffened up, and this put her in that place of having to defend herself, and that should have been known that that's probably what the reaction was going to be. And what she said next I thought was brilliant. She said, "By law, you have to include us." And the moderator said, "Oh, okay, so that de-risks the project." Went completely over her head. So that person clearly has a lot of positionality work to do to understand who they present as around people. You have to create a place in yourself and a place in your organization as an employer, as a firm, where it is safe for a marginalized person to come in. And until you do that, don't expect marginalized people to come in and not feel tokenized. And that doesn't really answer your question, but you triggered all of that in me, and I just wanted to share that because I think it's so important that we all do that heavy lifting.
And I think institutions across Canada are taking this seriously, and I'm going to speak specifically of University of Calgary, which has made, I would say, and one of the reasons I came to University of Calgary is because it's a much deeper commitment to EDIA. We have Melinda Smith leading the charge on the data. And it's how do we create that space that everybody is successful? Now I call it inclusive science. Are we there yet? No way, no how are we there yet. But we are taking conscious steps everywhere along the way. And I'll give two examples. So one is people have to see themselves, right, in these fields. And even when you're in an academic classroom, we have moved from, because I actually track all the data, a situation from 10 years ago where that faculty at University of Calgary Science, it was 80% male, 80% white. You don't see yourself when whoever's lecturing to you. These are barriers that you can't imagine. I experienced it myself as a female traveling up. When I was an undergrad at Queen's University biochemist, I was told to become a hairdresser.
What?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of hair. It was like grunge day. But regardless, and I had the gold medal at Queen's University. So that was, I think people have experienced barriers all along the way. And one is making sure that you have these leaders in positions. So University of Calgary has taken And this is Alberta, didn't go down so hot, but we did it. We have inclusive hiring objectives, including Black faculty, because it is an area where we are underrepresented, because it's important for us that we do have outstanding Black members on our faculty. And that's a journey that we are tracking every step along the way, and every year we are going to have metrics to see how has our hiring practices changed. We have changed how we do hiring. We went from no Indigenous scientists to we have signed on 4, and that's only been in a year. And it's very small changes in even things like hiring, how we post the ads, how we do interviews, that we actually recognize and get rid of some of our systematic barriers we had. The other thing we do on the student front, this year we've started a Black Science Students organization, and the intention is driven by students, but with support from the faculty and also support by John Cornish. Anybody who know him, he's the chancellor at University of Calgary. He is a Black business leader. He started the Black Business Chamber of Commerce in Calgary. So we are doing events where we are actively trying to mentor our Black science students with Black community members. And we are seeing a change in success. So I think these are critical questions to bring up. It is not easy for the ivory white tower to change overnight, but we are actively, or certain institutions, I'm going to say, are actively trying to change that perception. So. Come on over.
If next year I come and we'll see. But things are happening, but I think we do a lot more. I know when I say these things, people will answer to say, well, here is what we're doing, here's what we're
Yep.
doing, which I accept. And I start by saying it. But what I want to hear from people is, can you help us, or what more do you need to do?
I think that one of the things at EHRC that we've taken on is, and one of the things that we'd like to see more broadly across academia but also industry, is labor market parity. And what I mean by that is, if 33% of the Canadian population is Black and racialized, then in our industry, we should see at least 33% of the industry as Black and racialized. And the truth is, right now, we're much closer to 21, 22%. And so we have a lot of work to do for a number of the reasons that you've all articulated. So thank you for that piece. I think I have room for one more question right here at the back.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. It's been very interesting. Kristen, I would say you were not the only one being asked to do hairdressing. My younger sister was also asked to do hairdressing, but today she's a medical doctor practicing medicine.
So maybe that's a good sign. You're asked to be a hairdresser.
So my question is this. I interact with a lot of immigrants, so to say, who are new to Canada. And I would say I'm privileged to be part of this presentation, which is giving me a lot of information to work with and share with people. But I think the amount of information shared is limited. We have a huge population of immigrants who are currently frustrated with their life because they were professional back home and asked to come into Canada, that Canada has the opportunity for them. And they come in here for 3, 4, 5 years, they are not able to get their profession back. And it's becoming frustrating for them. A lot of them end up becoming Uber drivers, support workers, and not being fulfilled. What efforts are your organizations doing to reach to these people so that they can be back on their feet and practice what they've learned and possibly worked back? Some people have 14, 10 years experience, even in DEC and all sorts of sectors. And they come in here and they tell them, oh, you don't have the Canadian experience, or you don't have the Canadian education, or you don't have this, you don't have the network. How can they break these barriers and be able to put those experiences to use? Thank you.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question, and it almost makes me wonder. Did you get a copy of my notes before? Because I was going to ask a very similar question. Yeah. Okay. 2 minutes. All right. So, guys, we have to keep it under 2 minutes, and that includes our wrap-up statement, right? Yes. Okay. Does anybody want to start with this one? 30 seconds or less,
I don't
Kristen.
even know where to start. So I came from a faculty of medicine. This is such a challenging question. I think, naively people think, oh, we just run I don't know, some credential, and then they'll get like some or Calgary or Canadian academic experience. That is not the answer from what I have seen. It is so complex, but I think part of this has to do with re-educating our societies, our industry, everybody. That, if you were a trained engineer in India, you probably have the exact same education in a global society that we are in now. So I'm not sure who's to do that, but certainly organizations like APEGA should be leading the charge on that.
From my perspective, I've actually been the beneficiary of that silly bias. So I've managed to hire a lot of people at my organization that are extremely talented and nobody else in Canada would touch because they're so short-sighted and all they see is foreign experience.
We've actually done the same thing. I would say a good almost 60% of our staff now is foreign trained. And we've got a really awesome team that the ideas that they come up with as a team is just so far superior to what it would be if we just hired Canadians. No offense, Canadians, we also love you too. I happen to be one. I want to thank all of you for being here today for the panel. Everybody, few last words before we depart. Kristen, start with you.
Yeah, I think energy is the future, and I think universities need to start really thinking differently in all our curriculums. And University of Calgary, Faculty of Science is leading the way, so come and join us on our journey. Take an intern.
Louisa?
Make renewables cool.
Tamara?
I would just like to encourage everyone to step into their own leadership to try and make the changes that we have put forward today.
And my last word, it's been my last word now for the last little while, since the labor market study came out and told us that we're basically in desperate need for people, is go home, bring a friend. We need as many people in this industry as we can get, help them find the pathway in, and I will leave it there.